and thank you for being with us today. I personally know my work at the Kaplen JCC on the Palisades in Tenafly, and I've been learning or watching your work at your JCCs and what you have been doing for at least the last 2 years with the IAC, and I look forward to learn more with our participants about what you do. But before I start with the questions, if I can just ask each of you maybe to take 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your role at the JCC. When did you get when did you become the CEO of your JCC, and just a little bit so we can get to know you better. And then I have some questions for each of you that I would like you to answer. And as Ofer said, we will leave some time for Q&A, so you will have a chance to speak to the panelists as well. So, Jordan?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Jordan Shenker. I have been a JCC nomad. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, worked at that JCC for 8 years, moved to Houston, Texas for 10 years, Richmond, Virginia for 8, and for 4 years worked at the National JCC Association office before coming to the JCC on the Palisades 15 months ago.
Can't hold a job, can you?
It's tough. Make one stop in the Midwest and then back home, and I make a complete circle.
And Jordan has the best, he should be on the radio. Don't you think? I mean, he's like an unbelievable radio boy. I think the next move after this...
Sunday.
Jordan should be on the radio. My name is Mark Sokoll. I'm currently the president and CEO of the JCC of Greater Boston. I've been the CEO there for 15 years. Before that, lived in Israel for about 11 years. Was a Mori Derech for a long time. Worked at the place called the Alexander Muss High School in Israel. Did my army service in the infantry, and then ended up at a place called Beit Sefer L'Manigut Tzahal outside of Netanya, which was basically a R&R spot for guys and men and women in the Kurs K'tzinim. So they came and they had this American Jew teaching them about Jewish history and taking them on tours around the country that they grew up in, which was always an interesting experience. I'm also an ordained rabbi. I had a little part-time job as a rabbi the first years that I was a CEO at the JCC, and that's the story.
About traveling with the Grateful Dead.
Yes, and I travel. I left my Grateful Dead tie in the room this morning. I figured nobody on the panel. I got that wrong. Trial and error already. Yeah, big deadhead.
I'm Michael Feinstein. I am the CEO of the Bender JCC of Greater Washington, and I have been there 10 years and the CEO for about 8 years. Before JCC World, I was, I guess what you call a serial entrepreneur for about 20 years, and involved in the Jewish community on various boards and different organizations.
My name is Zach Bodner. I'm the CEO of the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto, California, the heart of Silicon Valley. First of all, let me just say thank you. It's an honor to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues who've been in the field for a long, long time. Another colleague, Jeff Metz, out in the audience from Vegas. Because I'm the kind of the new guy, new kid on the block, been in the role of the CEO at the JCC where I am for 3 years. Before that, I ran the Pacific Northwest for APAC out of San Francisco for about 15 years. So my love of Jewish life in Israel came from having spent my year abroad at Hebrew University, my junior year in college, and that was kind of the moment that clicked for me. And figuring out what I wanted to do after that point was hard, but it took a path that was roundabout. And so it was really that time at APAC that it all formulated, and when this opportunity came 3 years ago to be a part of the JCC in Palo Alto, I jumped at it.
My name is Orly Chen. A lot of you know me as Orly Chen. Israeli inside out. Came to the state in 1989. Was a very lonely Israeli girl at that time. There were very few of us living in the area. At the age of 21, I was already a mother for one child, and then at the age of 22, for a second child. became very passionate. At a very early stage, I understood that if I'm not gonna raise my children to be good Jewish kids, my chances of being close to them and not lose them are very slim. And from the very, very early age, I forced myself to be connected, if it's to Jewish schools, the JCCs, and anything that has to do with a Jewish religious. I'm not a religious person at all, but but I do understand the importance of being connected to a Jewish organization. And I'll tell you later how, things involved with me and what made me want to be more involved.
Thank you. And I want to mention that 2 years ago at the first IAC conference, it was funny, now you're all sitting here, but at the first IAC conference, we were 2 Israelis. I was working for the JCC for 1 year, and we had Orly from Zach's JCC, and we were the JCC representatives in this conference, which is amazing.
That's
how in 2 years we have JCC CEOs sitting here, and I think it's an involvement of both, the relationship for both sides, the IAC that invited those speakers and the CEOs who agreed to come here. And I want to address the next question to both Mark and Zach, please. Even though each JCC is different and operates in its own way and has its own role in the community, if you consider your JCCs as a whole, how would you describe the role of JCC in the Jewish community today? So Mark, if you would like to start, and then Zach will.
Age before beauty.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
Trial and error.
So we'll start with the error. Huge question. I'll be very brief. And Jeannie Lovey, who's on my staff here, the director of our Center for Families, has heard this story. So if she rolls her eyes and says you need a new story, it's her problem, not mine. So the evolving role of the JCC in the following story, right? The Hasidim always taught us to start with a story. So maybe 7 or 8 years ago, one of our preschool directors came to me and said, we have a problem. I think she was coming as like, okay, you're the CEO, tell me what to do. And also, you're a rabbi, so you may have some Jewish stuff to say about this. So here's the dilemma. There's a family in her preschool that has, it's almost Pesach, that has one from Atlanta, one from Chicago. Both are married to non-Jews. They're all coming to Boston for the weekend before Pesach. Everybody wants to do the Seder on Saturday night. Pesach begins Monday night. Everybody wants to do the Seder on Saturday night because some people are traveling, they want to go back, they don't want to stick around. So she says to me, the parent approached her and said, what do I do? She came to me and said, what do I say? And this is a microcosm, I think, in many ways for the evolving role of the JCCs. So, long story made short, how we came up with an answer collectively, and the response, which came from one of our management staff, and then became our collective response to this question, was whenever you choose to have your family Pesach Seder, do you have everything you need to make it a meaningful experience for all the generations that'll be around the table? And I thought it was brilliant, right? In other words, if you dissect that and use it as a case study, right, in communal authority and judgment, in evolving and changing habits and blah, 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 it is the answer for me, and that's why I tell the story first, that has characterized the changing role of JCCs in the community. If 30 years ago there were many monolithic ways of being Jewish, this is how you did it, and we built buildings and expected everybody to show up so we could be the central address for the Jewish community, where everybody would come and everybody would do their Jewish. That was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, by the way, when there was no such thing as IAC, and every Israeli that you'd run into on the streets of Newton, where our JCC is, would say, "We're here, but chozrim bot shnatayim," right? We're going back in 2 years because my wife is doing a doctorate at MIT or at Harvard, and we're just here temporarily. That was 30 years ago. The role of the JCCs now, and I'll encapsulate it in the following question, was the Harvard Business School professor who we hired about 8-9 years ago to help us develop a strategy for the future. And he said, no strategy until you answer this question: what business are you in? Classic Harvard Business School bullshit. You know, what business are you in? And we said, we're in the Jewish Community Center business. And he said, that's a terrible answer. What business are you? What business were you in 30 years ago? 30 years ago, we were in the business of bringing the Jewish community together in one building so they would stay Jewish. Now the business that we're in, and here's our answer, and I think it's the right answer for the role of the JCCs in the Jewish community. The answer is we're in the Jewish identity construction business. Michael was talking about being in the construction business. Sometimes we're in the real construction business. We are in the Jewish identity construction business. In other words, the role of the JCCs, as I see it, is to help individuals and families construct a Jewish identity for themselves on their own terms that has meaning, with our support and without our judgment. And there's no organization in the community that's positioned in a way better to be the front door to the Jewish community, to fill the pipeline for the future of the Jewish community, whatever cliche or slogan you want to use. But that going forward, it seems to me that is our essential role for, first and foremost, for the people whose lives we will affect, and for the community writ large. So I'll just put in one last plug, which is the next question that the business school consultant asked us was, okay, now I know what business are you in, who will miss you most if you go away? Right? But this is relevant stuff for whatever. If you use this in one of your businesses, I get a percentage of whatever happens. If you just use it for your JCC, it's free advice. Who will miss you most if you go away? And we really thought about it hard, because 30 years ago, we all would have said, well, everybody will, the seniors will miss us, and the teens will miss us, and the community will miss us, everybody will miss us. And then, no, you have to give one answer. And our answer in Boston, and I think it's relevant to what the role of the JCCs is going forward in the future, was families with children, especially young children. So that means, how do you direct your resources that way? How do you think about not just preschool, but engagement in large numbers and in scale? How do you think about doing that for the entire Jewish community? But I think, at least as much as I can extrapolate from a specific example, the answer to those two questions is the role of what the JCCs is now and should be going towards the future.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
A wise man once said that our grandparents came to the JCC because they were Jewish, but our grandchildren will be Jewish because they come to the JCC. That was actually Mark Sokoll. So he taught me that when I came early on to the JCC, and I believe it, because JCCs are becoming hubs where you can have authentic, meaningful Jewish experiences. It's not just a place any longer where you can go, the teens can play basketball after school, you can go for a schwitz, moms drop their kids off at the preschool, the teens go and hang out. It's a place now where you can have meaningful Jewish experiences. So we also spent some time thinking about what our message is, what our purpose is, and I would put a twist on Mark's language about Jewish identity, because we spent a lot of time thinking about it. Our role, we feel like, is to enrich lives, build community, and inspire Jewish journeys. And the reason why we chose the language of Jewish journeys is because we very intentionally feel like everybody can have a Jewish journey, whether you're Jewish or not. And out on the West Coast, especially in Northern California, there are a lot of Jews who are involved with the Jewish Community Center, and it's probably growing that way around the country. Just like more and more, I think in the next generation, there will be a lot of non-Jews in every Jewish family. Okay, and I'll share a story about our preschool, because our preschool has Jews and non-Jews in it, and one of our families, neither of the parents were Jewish, I met with them once and said, why do you send your kid to our preschool? We love that they're there. And they said, we love the Jewish values. We love Jewish values. We feel that they're universal values. For instance, we love that every Friday morning the kids do Shabbat. And now we do a family Friday night dinner. This is a non-Jewish family. He said, now we do a family Friday night dinner because we get it. We understand the value of coming together as a family. They get their challah from the JCC every Friday. She told me the story about how they went on a camping trip, and they had to stop at the JCC beforehand to get their challah for their Friday night dinner on their camping trip. Now their kids have graduated to preschool, and what does she do? Every Friday afternoon, she homemade bakes her own challah. This is a non-Jewish family. And I think that's the beauty of what a JCC has to offer. Because of the values that we espouse, you can have a Jewish journey, whether you're Jewish or not. And there's obviously different levels of depth depending on how much you want to be or do Jewish. But in today's day and age, where people are more identifying with the verb form than the adjective form, people are doing Jewish more than being Jewish. We have non-Jewish board members, and they're married to Jews, but it's the non-Jewish member of the couple that actually wants to do the Jewish, and they're no longer converting in the traditional way, right? So what does that mean for Jewish identity tomorrow? We don't know, but we have to make it available so that they can do Passover on the closest Saturday, because guess what? That's what American holidays are. When's Mother's Day? When's Veterans Day? When's Memorial? Oh, it just so happens that it's not on the same day every single year. Actually, Veterans Day. But a lot of the holidays we do in America are just around the closest Sunday, right? So there's no rule that says that in today's modern Jewish society we can't adapt this way. And that's what we believe a JCC needs to be. It's helping figure out where should Judaism go tomorrow. Because we're not constricted. We're not bound by the same halachot, by the same minhagim. We're not bound by you have to be this certain type of Jew. We're open to everybody in our community.
Thank you. I want to direct the next question to Michael and Jordan. And if you're looking at the role of community building and lay leadership engagement, which is something that we at the IAC also are working on all the time, how are JCC meeting this need today, and what can you share as an example for a specific experience at your JCC about community building and lay leadership engagement?
So when I started at the JCC 10 years ago, I was a little surprised by what I heard in the JCC. What I heard was English and Hebrew and Russian and Spanish and French.
No Asian?
A little Persian.
Asian.
Oh, Asian. No, not so much. Now we have Asian. We didn't have Asian then. Now there is Chinese also, and Indian, but all Jewish. And so for me, our role in community building reflects the fact that we are not a community that is monolithic. We are actually a community of communities, and that is our challenge, and that's our strength. And so as we started to look at, well, what is our mission with regard to building community, it really began with the idea that our job is to connect our community to each other, as well as the broader community and to Israel. And creating that opportunity for connections, whether it's programs specifically for Israelis or Russians or teens or seniors, also means that these different groups have the opportunity to connect through fitness, through spinning, through our preschool, through our parenting center. And so it is really focusing on serving these different communities in ways that allow for intersection, cross-pollination, that I think is the way we build community and come to some sort of shared sense of values that are important for us as an organization. When it comes to lay leaders, I think for us it's also about how do we move in a direction where we have lay leaders that reflect the diversity in our community. And so, I don't know, a half dozen years ago, Gileari, who's in the back, was our first Israeli board member that we actually intentionally sought out to bring an Israeli American on our board to provide some voice, and he's decided to retire from our board. And he's now the IAC chair in our area, and we have another Israeli who's come onto another Israeli American who's come onto our board. And so I think developing lay leadership is really about thinking about what voices do we need to hear around the table to guide the organization, and and kind of move us forward. When I think about examples of how we create some of the intersections, a lot of that happens in our teen groups. We have a large BBYO chapter that meets at our JCC, as well as the Tzofim, as well as a Russian teen group, as well as many, many other teen groups. And so what we do is we encourage them to come together, not just only meet separately, but to come together, and sometimes that's through social action programs and other opportunities where they actually start to get to know each other. Last year we partnered with our new IAC chapter and offered IAC Etanim, and so our 12 or so teens that were in that program were about half American Jews and half Israeli Americans. And again, that's about creating those opportunities for Jews across the spectrum to come together and connect with each other in meaningful ways.
Thank you.
Nice.
Jordan?
So if you think about the frame that Mark and Zach use, they answered the question of why do JCCs exist? If you think about what Michael spoke about, what I'm going to focus on, it's how do we do the work that we do? I think it's a really important concept to separate those ideas. We often, I think in Jewish communal life in general and at JCC specifically, try to start with the second question as opposed to the first. And I can't emphasize strongly enough how we have to stay focused on the first question in order to be able to answer the second. And we've offered some perspective here about our particular point of view or opinion on some of those. It's really important you do those things locally and get a good answer to the why question before you talk about the how question. That said, I think there are some generalities around the how question, and I want to spend a moment talking about the idea of micro-communities. Michael alluded to this as well. JCCs of the past focused on the lens of looking at service delivery from an age-based or an interest-based modality. Exclusively, we looked at preschoolers and children and teens and adults as a modality, or we looked at let's do programming in classes, events, general kinds of community programming. Today, that shift is looking at micro-targeted communities of all different kinds of ranges and special interests to look at their particular unique needs and how do we program for them. You could also look at it from the perspective of a universal perspective as opposed to a particular perspective. How do we focus in on small populations that have particular areas of interest and particular needs and address those needs directly? Israeli Americans are an example of one of those micro-communities. This creates both an opportunity and a challenge for Jewish communal organizations and for JCCs, because we still have the need to address the modality of age-based programming and interest-based programming, while at the same time looking at identifying micro-target markets to whom we need to program differently. And it doesn't mean if we're doing this that we can no longer do that. Mm-hmm. So how do we allocate our resources in a way that maximizes those experiences? One of the key philosophical questions when you begin looking at targeting a micro-community is, to what extent can I engage that micro-community to include and involve them in things we're already doing, versus what do I have to program directly to meet their needs exclusively and independently? And there's no, I can't give you an answer to that question. I'm not sure even with the successes we've had in our community that we even have an answer to that question yet. But it's a dance that I think is critical to the ongoing conversation, to challenge yourself to say, where are the opportunities where we can engage them individually? Where are the opportunities to draw them in? This is one of the places where lay leadership engagement, I think, is critical. Finding key influencers in that micro community that will help be your advocate, that will help interpret to that micro community how and why it's important to engage with the rest of the community, and where there are opportunities to engage individually. When you have lay leaders who can then be those advocates and those key influencers, involving them in the planning process, and you'll hear from a rock star one in our community in a few minutes. Orly is an example of that, who was a key influencer to enable us to attract that population. Two quick examples of decisions we made in our community to go in two different directions in thinking about that balance. There was an initial push a decade or so ago to create a Hebrew language preschool, separate and independent from our existing preschool. And at the time I wasn't there, but the thought process still holds. Our community decided not to do that because we felt as though it was going to compromise the overall community experience that we were creating for our kids, and actually involving the Israeli Americans in the preschool was going to add value to the experience of the other kids, and we believed was going to add value to the Israelis that were in it. So we made a decision at that time to create an inclusive environment there where we were going to engage them in the program. Today, out of 300 kids, 75 of them are Israelis in our preschool. Huge involvement, significant business opportunity for us. Conversely, we also, over the last few years, developed an after-school Hebrew language program for Hebrew speakers. Let me say that again. An after-school Hebrew language program for Hebrew speakers. Why? Because Israeli American children often don't know how to read or write in Hebrew. They may be fluent Hebrew speakers, but they can't read or write. So we have a program that doesn't teach them how to speak in Hebrew, but it does teach them how to read and write. And the program is, at least began, exclusively for Hebrew speakers. Separate, independent, meeting their needs directly, not looking at the greater communal needs. We've since added a non-fluent Hebrew speaker section of the particular program. It also includes an element of Israeli culture. These are not clear distinctions, and for many communities, they have to be local decisions to impact how you're going to engage your community in a particular way. I think for me, when I think about the role of JCCs in community building and lay leadership engagement, it's this idea of how do we target the micro community, identify what their particular unique needs are, and then balance where we can meet their needs uniquely versus universally.
Great job.
Thank you, Jordan. And
That's great.
I want to ask Orly, you spoke about lay leadership engagement that enable things to happen and open doors. And Orly, you chose a pretty unique way, especially considering how long you chose it. Today is maybe more common, but you became involved with the JCC many years ago when Israelis were not very involved in any Jewish institutions, including the JCC. So I wanted to ask you if you can share with us a little bit about why you chose to do it, and just to mention that in order to open doors like this, door to a JCC or to a federation or to a synagogue, sometimes you need someone who is internal, who understands both needs. And I think you, at a very early stage, understood both needs. You understood the needs of the Jewish community, and you understood the needs of the Israeli community. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you to share with us a little bit about your own personal experience and why you chose this route.
So again, I told you I moved in '89, just finished the army and came here, got married right away, and became a mother very fast. Left a huge family, typical Sephardic family in Israel, and I was pretty much alone. And the notion of having to raise those children to be good Jewish kids, connected Jewish kids, seems to me like would be an impossible mission. It's something that Shlomo and I were discussing it. Yes, we're going to visit Israel more, and we're going to, we're going to celebrate the holidays, and I'm going to keep kashrut in the house. But it wasn't enough. I looked at my other Israeli friends, and I saw, that our children are not going to be typical Israeli children, and they're not going to be a typical American kid, Jewish American kid, and it's going to be something that's going to be almost nothing. We're going to create a prototype that we're not going to be able to relate to. So one of the decisions we made, and as difficult as it was financially, was to send them to Jewish schools. I felt sending them to Jewish school would help me, would give me a frame of work, being an environment where I'm more familiar with, making it easy on me to get involved, walking in the hallways of the school and seeing Hebrew, and teaching them stuff I don't even know. My kids today can speak with you about anything in the Bible. Even me growing up in Israel, Torah, studying Torah and any biblical, subject was punishment. So I think we enrichment in so many, we gave them so much more, a lot of knowledge, but also strengthened their Jewish identity, that I can tell you I have a 25 years old, I have a 23 years old, and a 15 years old. I don't know what life's, what's going to happen in the future. One thing I can tell you that we, and I'm certain about it, that we've raised them to be very, very comfortable Jewish kids. And it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job when both of us has to work. Financially, it was a huge burden. And it's very easy to say not to pay the $40,000 a kid for Jewish education when you don't have the money. And I actually remember waking up in the morning, every morning, and the first thing I say, you know what, just, God, please just give me enough so I can afford to pay for those children to go to Jewish school. So, one of the reasons we moved to Tenafly, most of the kids who went to those Jewish schools, lived in the Tenafly, Closter, Presskill area, and we made a decision to move to Tenafly, and Jordan and I heard the story before, but also something that was really that touched me a lot. I remember every morning as I dropped my kids at the nursery school there, I would see buses coming to the center, bringing seniors from all over Bergen County. They would bring disabled kids to the center, and they would care for them in such a way that I haven't never seen. They would take them to the center, they'll feed them, they'll play with them, they gave them life, they gave them something that touched my heart so much. And I always say that at one point in my life, when I have the time and financially I'll be able, I want to be part of something that does this so much, this goodness. And as soon as I was able, time-wise and financially, I decided to be committed and be, part of these organizations that that does such beautiful things. There was a time, and I'm talking about almost 25 years ago, Israelis not always felt very comfortable at Jewish Center. Mm-hmm. There was something about, a time of hardship, we are all together, we're Jewish people. But in our, usual routine, it wasn't very comfortable always, being at the center. Although I must say I never felt this way. But that was the notions among my Israeli friends. They weren't feeling welcomed. It almost, they almost not, felt uncomfortable speaking the language even. There was something about, they felt different. They were Jewish, but they were Israelis, and the Americans, there was a huge cultural gap. And I think the more Israelis that moved to the area, and the more present they had at the JCC, two things happened. I think we, the Israelis, changed. We started to understand the concept of those organizations. We started to understand that those organizations will not survive without the support and the giving, from the community. And I think also the JCCs changed. We also recognize that there is a huge target market, and it's a growing target market. Through my job as a real estate agent, I'm moving about 25, 30 families a year to our area from Israel. Great Israeli, top of the line Israelis. It's so sad to see that they're leaving Israel, but they're coming here, but it's a fact, and we have to take advantage and make those people connected. A lot of them take their Israeliness for granted. They speak Hebrew, so they're safe, and they're so not safe. And creating an environment where they can come and feel connected. There is no, I think our center at least makes it so easy for them to feel connected and not, there is so much that we offer, and most of them feel the JCC is it's a very warm and welcoming environment to them. In many ways, the JCC helped me raise my children. I always say that it's not the first time, and I'm very grateful. And for that, I'm willing to give my time and whatever I can.
Thank you. So I want to ask the four of you, Zach, Michael, Mark, and Jordan, a three-pronged question. You don't have to answer all of them. But I want to ask you that question, and then we will open up for some Q&A and discussion. So each of you was invited to sit on this panel because you have achieved some level of success in engagement of the Israeli-American community. And I wanted to ask you if you want to share with us a little bit about your community experience with that population of the Israeli-American. The second part that I would like to put out there is maybe if you want to share with us a challenge, a communal challenge that turned into a success that you want to share with us that we can all learn from. And the third part of this question is, what is your vision for the future? Where do you see the JCC going in terms of the engagement of the Israeli-American community? And if you want to choose just one of those three or two or all of them, I'll be happy to get your perspective on that. And I think after that we can open it up for a discussion. So maybe, Mark, if you want to start.
Sure. I think we should try to do this quick, so we have what time do we finish?
We have
half hour.
Yes.
So just just one or two highlights. The reality, and Jordan alluded to this, our largest preschool is a couple of hundred kids. The director the other day told me she thinks about 35% of them are Israeli families. Our second largest preschool is half that size, a little less. It's 55% Israeli families. So I came to this conference last year because I knew this was good for business. And you know, we were debating what's the percentage of Israelis. What's the number of Israelis living in North America? 750,000, 600,000, a million? I'm not sure, but it's certainly whatever percentage of Israeli Jews that is. It's even more of a percentage, because there's now more Israeli Jews than American Jews. It's a more significant percentage of American Jews. The Israeli Jewish population of America is a significant part of our community, and by and large, I think it's a more engaged, more active than by the measures and the metrics of American Jews. So one thing to really keep in mind was I started noticing this a few years back, and it was the conference here last year completely blew my mind. Completely, the seismic shift of all the ministers from the Israeli government and the chief rabbi of Israel and everybody who stood up and said, you know, we need you, you're ambassadors, there's no shame, there's no embarrassment. There's this sea change, this seismic shift. So it's like, okay, all doors are open. So there's a lot of great models on the panel. I don't want to go into all of them, but I think we are all here because, however it gets expressed in our communities, the change is dramatic. It's really dramatic in terms of the Israelis' presence in our community relationship with our JCCs. Two, I hit a milestone 2 weeks ago when my Israeli board member, Avi Almazlino, who's on the national board of IAC, came with me to solicit another guy who's active in IAC locally, who's not Israeli, but who is married to an Israeli. And Avi came onto the board because he's Israeli, but also because he's a neurologist, and we run a Parkinson's program for Parkinson's wellness, and because he's a smart guy and can help us think of strategically about problems. So let's not make the mistake of having Israelis on the board because they're Israeli. They're also doctors and real estate people and smart about a lot of other things that are of strategic importance to the JCC. But that was turning the challenge of how to get into a success. And finally, on the issue of vision for the future, the longer I should say you Israelis, I'm right, I have an Israeli passport. The longer us Israelis, the longer Israelis live here in North America, the more they will behave like everybody else. That means intermarriage, spreading out in terms of geography, choice in where and how they send their kids to school and how they educate them, and all of the issues look, the crunch time is going to come for so many Israelis, and Orly, I don't know if this is, you get good Jewish kids, they went to day school, but when the Israelis in Boston, when their kids start coming home from Newton South and Newton North High School and say, I want you to meet my boyfriend, his name is Christopher, this is my girlfriend, Christine. And not that there's anything wrong with Christopher. I know a lot of nice Christophers and Christines. But Israelis families are in for a trauma around Masinu, what did we do? So putting all this in a quick vision for the future is what Israelis can teach and learn the American Jewish community. So what Israelis can teach the community that you are now a part of is, one, how to be more direct. You know something about that. It's called Dugri. Number two, how to turn things around quicker. American Jews are planners.
Right.
We plan. We're not as bad as the Japanese, but we plan, and it takes too long. Israelis, IAC office in Boston calls us. We want to do, they're about a mile away from us, we want to do Shavuot at the JCC. Within 3 minutes, they're at the JCC with 700 people running a program, milking cows. Not real cows, cardboard cows with gloves on the bottom with the stuff coming out, and there's 700 people on the lawn. The Tzofim caravan is going, Tzofim, Kadima Tzofim, and there's a program in 3 minutes. That idea of quick turnaround in organization is really a valuable lesson for us. And 3, Israelis can teach for the future American Jews how caring about something ostensibly religious doesn't mean that you are religious. Meaning Israelis understand that celebrating Shavuot doesn't mean that you're a religious Jew, and it's okay to do that and have fun. We have the crisis of the preschool, which is Israelis freaking out that we don't do a massive Purim spiel. You can do a Purim spiel, and it doesn't mean you're a religious Jew. And American Jews don't know the difference. It's either that stuff you do or you don't do, and Israelis have some of a sense, in spite of what you might think about Israelis' view of religion being black and white, Israelis have a more nuanced view of that. What Israelis can learn and need to learn is you should stay close to us, because we really know what to do when one of your kids comes home and says, this is Chris or Christine. Right? It took us a long time to learn that the chuppah isn't the end of the story, it's only the beginning of the story. That it's only where the questions begin to be asked on who you marry as to what happens for someone's Jewish identity. We have a lot to teach from experience, from trial and error, about how to answer that question, how to respond. We also have a lot to teach Israelis about ritual. By doing a ritual, it doesn't mean you're religious. If you say motzi and you do blessings and you understand the power of Shechianu or a Shabbat dinner, that doesn't mean you've become you've become the enemy and you're now a religious Jew. We can help you with that nuance. And finally, I think Israelis have an awful lot to learn from the American Jewish community about what diversity actually really means, because we're just figuring it out. Never mind, other stories for another day, but and a bunch are running through. But there's a lot that goes on in our communities. Zach spoke to it eloquently. It does not mean that our community is less Jewish because there are more non-Jews participating in our programs. There's a great article, If You Marry a Jew, You're One of Us. And there's a lot to learn from American Jews about our community does not get diluted by adding different elements to it.
Well,
Sorry,
maybe we'll go Michael and Zach, and we'll go back to Jordan.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
So actually, a lot of what Mark and Orly said kind of ring true for me. And in the greater Washington area, we have the embassy, so we have a lot of Israelis who are transient here, as well as a large and growing Israeli population that's staying here. And I think for me, how to questions. I don't know what the definition of success is, but why we have so many Israelis feeling comfortable in our JCC is actually about our flexibility. And I think that I recognized a long time ago that we need to be a JCC and a matnas at the same time. And that's really important in terms of the idea of being welcoming and everybody feeling comfortable. The challenge is all of the cultural differences, right? Mark alluded to the planning versus being in the present, right? So Ronit, who's sitting, who's our IAC director, sitting in the back there, said to me last year, we want to do a Tanim, it's this teen program, it'll bring Israelis and Americans, it'll be about leadership, it'll be about innovation, sounds great. So should we talk about this for September? She knows, I think we should think 2 weeks. So 2 weeks later, you know, we were in the midst of recruiting and the program was up and running. And so I've learned from her that we actually don't necessarily have to plan. And I think our willingness to move forward in that way helps make us a little bit more successful. The other challenge that I've noticed is this concept, and I think Mark alluded to it, is the cultural difference between being Israeli and being Jewish, right? And so I had a personal trainer, and I think Orly spoke to us. I had a personal trainer who was Israeli. And we were talking about the Yom Kippur, do you fast? No, I don't fast, I don't do this, I don't do that. And I said, are you Jewish? He goes, no, I'm not Jewish, I'm Israeli. And I think that understanding that and understanding how we can introduce something about Jewish to Israelis, and because it's not all one way or all the other way, either you're secular or you're Orthodox. I think being open to that and being able to work with that cultural difference is helpful to being successful. And the other challenge we often have culturally is how you raise your kids in Israel is not how you raise your kids in America, right? So when I had an Israeli parent drop their 5-year-old off in front of our building so she could find her way through the building to the pool for her swim lesson and change herself, we realized we have a problem, right? So we have to have a conversation about it. It's a little different in America than it is in Israel, and it's great that our Israeli community views the JCC as being a really safe place for their kids, but we have to understand that there are some differences. So I think that really, for me, recognizing what those cultural differences are and making sure we incorporate them and address them in a really open way is kind of the key to the success that we've had and the key to moving forward. And I think that's really our opportunity, is how do we leverage the best of what American Jews can offer Israelis in terms of, you know, what does it mean to be Jewish culturally, right? Not just religiously. And the idea that there's a continuum, and what can Israelis teach us and bring to our community that really helps solidify that connection to Israel. So I would say for us, that's where we are.
Thank you.
Yeah, both of what my colleagues have said ring very true, and I'm sure as many of you in the audience know, when this comes to a head is when you have kids that are born in America. If you're an Israeli that moves here and then you have a kid that's born in America, as Orly said, it's that moment when they become 13 and they don't understand why to have a bar bat mitzvah. It's that moment when they're graduating from high school and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to go back into the IDF. And all of a sudden it pops for you as a parent. You're like, whoa, and your kid is struggling with their own identity. I'm not Israeli, I'm not American, I'm not Jewish. That's when these issues become important. So that's why you've seen, I think that's why we've reached this tipping point. And that's why the IAC has become now as important as it is. In the last couple of years, all these Israelis who've come to America, their kids have now gotten to an age where they're like, holy crap, I need to pay attention to this. This happened in Silicon Valley 10 years ago. That's why we're a little ahead of the curve, because we have 50,000 Israeli expats living in Silicon Valley. They originally came and they wanted to do Israeli cultural events. They wanted to do stuff in Hebrew. They wanted to see Shlomo Artzi. Now it's Hadag Nachash. Right? And it's shifted. It's gone from being highly cultural and entertainment to now meaning. And so I think the biggest challenges for the future are going to be answering these three big questions. For your kids, for our kids, for American kids, for Israeli kids. One, why is Israel personally important to me today? Why is Israel personally important? Yeah, I understand why it was important for my parents, my grandparents. Why is it personally important? Two, how do I still love and support Israel if I disagree with Israel? Disagree with Israeli policies, Israeli government, Israeli decisions? And three, at the heart of the matter is, why be Jewish? Why still be Jewish? Why is that so important? Why not love and marry and raise, little Christophers and Christines, to use Mark's term? Why not? If they're great people, and tikkun olam, the joke is that the American Jews go to Israel and ask, what's the Hebrew word for tikkun olam, right? Because tikkun olam has become the way that most Jews do Jewish. And many of our kids are saying, so that's not necessarily a Jewish thing. I know plenty of good Christian people who are making the world a better place, right? So we have to be able to help answer those questions for Israeli and non-Israeli populations, and that's going to be at the heart of what JCCs are about, where Israelis can fit into this. And one of the main challenges we're addressing is this idea of bridging. Okay, it's no longer, and this, I'm going to throw something out there that's a little controversial, but this is why the IAC in our neck of the woods out in Palo Alto has had a little bit of a struggle making inroads, right? You'll see that map and you open the annual report, and it's kind of curious that there's no IAC office or bunker up in Northern California. Why? Because there's this need to try and want to integrate the Israeli community with the non-Israeli community where we are. And there's a feeling that IAC is about keeping the Israelis shtetalized in their own amongst Israelis. And so, should that be the way it is, or should there be this integration with the greater non-Israeli Jewish community? And that is something we're struggling with now, and we're trying to integrate. And again, I'm thinking we're a few years ahead of where the rest of the community is going to be.
That's an important point.
So in Tenafly, we've been playing the long game. We have 20 years or so worth of history of developing programming for the Israeli-American community. And one of the reasons we've achieved success today is inertia and building on momentum. We have had Israelis move to our community over the last decade because there are Israelis in our community and because we had been doing programming for them. So while initially it was entirely a mission-based decision to serve this community, as Mark alluded to, it's now become a significant business opportunity to do so as well. With now 25,000 Israeli Americans living in our catchment area, 25% of our preschool, 75 kids. 20% of our summer camp program, 150 kids a week. Thanks in part to our partners at Big Idea, raise your hand guys, which is an Israeli company that did a Hebrew-speaking camp for us this summer. Our EMEC program, our after-school program, and general programming for Israeli Americans, we're generating about $2 million in revenue from this micro-community. That's 10% of our overall revenue for our institution. That is a significant business opportunity for us. So as we think about the opportunity to engage in this community, it's not only the right thing to do because of who we are and why we exist, it's also the right thing to do because there's a significant business opportunity in it for us. In terms of challenges, it's so funny that all of us thought about this idea of needing to pivot immediately. I use one of those examples as well, so you know it must be really true for this community that planning is not so much on the forefront. We had an example just in the last couple of months at our center. It's a small program, but it's a microcosm of the concept. We had one of our staff say, a bunch of these Israelis' moms want to do something social together, and they've come up with this program concept called Newcomb, entry-level volleyball. Catch ball, whatever. Well, what are we getting to do this? Well, it'll cost us $2 or $3 to buy the equipment. We'll need to get some people in. We need to 10 days from the moment they said that, we had bought the equipment, we had installed it, and we had 55 women already enrolled. We're up to 75 now? 75 women enrolled and participating in the class. All I had to do was say, yeah, sounds great, right? Basically overnight, we now have 75 women coming several days a week to do a program, and we invested $3,000. We've already recouped our investment. We're now going to make $5,000 a year profit on this program that's also engaging the population. I think there are hundreds of those kinds of examples waiting to happen. We simply have to be the place to enable those things to happen. In terms of where we're going, we need to find opportunities to say we need to build these bridges to the community and to the general community. When we figure that out, we'll let you know.
Jordan, maybe one thing to add. When we talk, we're doing a lot of those programs, and sometimes we're afraid. We want to make them money-generating, programs to the centers, and a lot of times we put so much effort, and we're at the point where most of those Israelis who move to the area can afford those programs. If they like it, they'll pay for it. And if we start charging a little bit more for those programs, you're not going to lose the Israelis, you're not going to lose the programs, and I think it's going to be even a much higher source of income to the center. So we can do more, we can do more and offer more programs to, to Israelis and to American.
Orly just increased your margins.
Yes, you can increase, if
Don't give it
I'll
away.
give you an
When I says we can't raise the price, he said, I said in the conference, Orly
Increase the
said we can
price.
raise the prices.
If a mama net pays $10 a year to be part of this, if you charge her $25 a year, she still is going to sign for this program. So I think we also have to think, It's not, yes, we are an organization that wants to make it to make it affordable, but sometimes we are way too affordable, and it's okay to charge a little bit more so we can generate more profit and give more back. It's not something that we are not taking the money and keeping the money. We want the money so we can do more. I think we should also think, even in AMEC, and other programs we do, it's okay to charge a little bit more, and you'll see that, just this is the business aspects to this philanthropic.
We're all like whooping inside.
Yalla.
All right, so I want to open it up for questions. Please, if you want to ask a question, just stand up so people will know how to direct their attention. Shuki? Oh, you're going that way. Okay. Wait. Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Lee. I'm working at the Jewish Federation of Toronto. Actually was in the first conference in Canada years ago, and I find this kind of fascinating because we're all dealing and struggling with the same things. Just a little bit about our community. So the Toronto Jewish community is about 200,000 Jews, but a third of those are newcomers from Israel or Israeli Russians. So the Israelis are a significant part of the community, and so it changed the mindset of Federation in terms of planning for them, and I think that's why there's stuff like me at Federation, or allocating programs and resources for that community. I have a couple of questions for you, Orly, in specific. What I find with Israelis, being an Israeli myself, sitting in a Canadian organization that likes meetings and pre-meetings and pre-planning and all of that, do it in 2018 and all of that. I find Israelis are very grassroots. We have so many Facebook groups. Moms drive the train very strongly. And so how we get the Israelis to understand the value of institutions, because I think a lot of times the Israelis come to the JCC when they need a space, but they're not really interested in the philosophy and all of that stuff. They just want a Hanukkah party, and it's 2 weeks before, and they're going to have it. Either they're going to have it at the JCC, or they're going to have it at Chabad, or they're going to have it somewhere.
Right.
So how do you, in terms of an educational process, tell the difference or educate for the difference between having chevra and having a community that has institutions that can, ensure Jewish identity and ensure, all of that stuff that only an organization can do. I think in the U.S. you have the IAC, which is, a developmental stage, but in Toronto they're more like, as long as they're comfortable, that's fine, and they don't really understand the organization part.
So if I can tell you, for me, I think once you understand the concept of building a community, it's something that I've never heard. What do you mean building a community? It's in Israel, you have the matnas, resources where it came from the government. Going to a synagogue, paying for a synagogue. I was insulted when I came, and they told me you have to pay for a sit in a synagogue. I said, what? I refused for the first couple of years. First of all, I think it's time. Putting them in positions like me being at the board of the JCC. Took me, I could, the first year I said nothing. I was the quietest member at the board, saying nothing, observing, listening, and understanding a concept that we are not accustomed to. It's, even the formalities of those, meetings. And it takes time to understand the system. The system is very different than what we are accustomed to. But I think the more you put Israelis, I think we should put more Israelis on the JCC board nowadays. I think the more you empower them and the more space to create and do, you give them the space to do things. And put them on boards, put them in committees, and make them understand how things work. It will happen, you'll get them involved, they start caring more. And also, understanding what, when you raise funds, what are you raising these funds for? If it's raising the fund for this, the JCC, who's being perceived as a very wealthy, organization to begin with, it's meaningless. I don't want my money goes to a building that, but I want my money to go to the senior departments, and I want my money to go to, the disabled kids. You just have to tell me. The other day, the chair of the disabled kids came to the board and told her story. we all had tears in our eyes, and of course you're gonna give. You know, I think once once you get them more familiar with how the system works, put them in positions like I've been, you know, the opportunity that was given to me. I was terrified in the beginning. I didn't think there is nothing I would be able to give. But you know what? Little by little, it's education, it's time. Give them some nice positions, and you'll see Israelis are very creative, hardworking people. They catch it very fast. And I must say, in our department, it's really not because of me. We had a tremendous group of people, and Aya is a key factor into the success of this department. But we were running on deficits, and it's always, I was sitting at the board meeting where all the departments were performing so beautiful, and the Israeli department was, you know, it was embarrassing. And I said to myself, we must change that. We must make it a profitable, a good, you know, that we all can be very proud of. And I think once you put those Israelis in those positions, you'll be surprised. You know, they'll Israelis are very capable. Just give them the opportunity.
I think it's also, though, that if we allow the Israeli community to feel like we're giving our JCC space and that's all they're getting out of it, that's all they're going to look at it for.
Exactly.
Okay, so I view it as my job to be there when there's a meeting or to welcome one of the clubs or whatever, and help create the linkage to the organization, so it's not just a room anywhere. It's why are you here?
Yep.
Why do we want you here? And what else do we want you to do?
Thank you. I just have one more question. Another debate in terms of our location is programming for first generation, so for the newcomers, the parents themselves, or the children. And I'm just curious for the executive director, what percentage roughly, where is the focus? Is it on the children who are here, or on parents who do their cultural-based program?
Kids. You get the kids, you get the parents. I'd start with kids first. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I in principle agree, but I think our view would be more, it's about the family, because the family, you know, has certain needs that they're going to address together and make decisions. So if it's about the kids, you get the family, agreed. But the parents are the ones who ultimately make decisions about where, you know, where the kids go and how they spend their time, money, and resources. So yeah, family.
I think one of the other cultural differences is that Israelis, you know, wrote the book on word of mouth marketing, right? And so the fact that, you know, for us that we have a large Israeli contingent at our JCC, I mean, I have people, you know, in Israel signing up for our preschool, you know, for 4 months when they're coming.
Yep.
So it is really about that, and it's really, I think, both sides.
Let's let Andrew and Robin ask questions.
Yeah. So my name is Andrew Doxer. I work for several summers now at the Camp Grossman, JCC in Greater Boston. So I work at the JCC, but it's not a full-time thing. But in any case, I'm really connected to the idea of camp, and I'm very excited that there's now a IAC chapter in Boston. And I've been thinking about and talking to some of the senior staff at camp about doing more Israel programming. We have a ton of Hebrew-speaking kids. It's unbelievable, and we're not really tapping into it yet. And you know, so much of the research into the potential of camping is around overnight camps, but I think there's great potential for day camps. But camps in general, as part of the JCCs, I'm kind of wondering about hearing from everyone if besides the early the preschools and the cultural things, if there's an idea about camps, maximizing that as a potential for some kind of strengthening the partnership of IAC, bringing the Israelis into the fold.
I think this comes back to what Jordan was saying about the preschool decision. I mean, we personally were approached by a number of different individuals, organizations about running Hebrew-only camp, and we would rather integrate it into our normal camp. We also didn't open a separate Hebrew school and Hebrew language preschool, but we have Ulpanon classes within our preschool, right? There's opportunities for integration, going back to what I was talking about, and I think that if we're looking at Hebrew language spoken in the camp, we would rather find a way to integrate it.
I think there are 3 ways to integrate, and Zach mentioned the first. Hire Hebrew-speaking staff to integrate the kids into your existing program is one. 2 is creating a unit within the camp that's a Hebrew-speaking unit. So you have a group that's part and integrated with the regular camp, but it is a Hebrew-speaking unit. And 3 is create a Hebrew language camp. We had always done, at least for the last decade or so, strategy 1. We've begun to do strategies 2 and 3. In fact, our partners sitting in the room here could tell you a little bit about our successes here. In our very first year this summer doing a Hebrew language technology-focused camp, we have over 100 kids a week in that camp program running 8 weeks, from 0 to 100 in year 1. I think there is big business opportunity, and that was 3rd through 8th grades. So I think there is big business opportunity, particularly in the elementary school age groups, at looking at some niche programming that addresses that market.
Can I just throw in one takeaway? Because what I'm sitting here thinking is we have not done a good enough job training our staff at the JCC locally, and maybe to elevate this to a national issue for our JCC movement. We have not done a good enough job training our staff to think in a way that this conversation would teach and would reflect. You know, staff, so we were approached by the catchball folks, you know, the catchball women in well, we got 300 Israeli women who want to come play catchball at the JCC. And the staff is, those Israelis, you know, they always want something for free, and they're always trying to negotiate a deal, and they're always trying to cut this, and it's like, wake up. You know, this is an incredible opportunity, and I think for my takeaway is, certainly we've talked a lot about the lay leadership side, but there needs an IAC, JCC partnership, because those that have gotten really good at it can also teach those that are along the way. So if it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and us, it's just 5 years, you know, whatever it is, we have a lot to learn as a JCC field. That so much of what we do is staff driven. I know volunteers make it, but staff are making these day-to-day decisions about programs. They can stand in the way or they can really accelerate things. So huge takeaway from me listening to this panel and your questions. It's like, we got to get our staff up to speed on this is what's going on. This is what's happening in America. This is business opportunity, future. We got to wake up.
So I know we have a few more. I wanna let Robin, the lady here in gray, who wanted to ask, and someone in the back. Maybe we will just, if each of you can ask the question, and then each of you can decide to respond to one of them, so that way people, if they want to go to the next panel, they can still do it and not be late like Israelis.
Marvin Down from JCC Association. Thanks, Mark, food for thought. All of you in your own way mentioned influencers in your communities. Maybe you can share with all of us how you found the influencers and why it's so important to find each of them, to educate them. And this will help you to find the right people to help you get into that community and build your programming and engagement around that.
Okay, so influencers is one question. Can you ask her?
Hi, I'm Mindy Berger, and I'm a lay leader at the Vendor JCC of Greater Washington, and I also work for the Jewish Women's Renaissance Project in Israel. And my question is, what's in place for women when they come back that can help engage with other Israeli mothers that there's potential in community centers?
Okay, so mothers, and the last one, Anat.
I have a question about how you can address issues when you have conflict between Israeli approach or the Jewish approach, and maybe it's the $1 million question. I'll give an example for like celebrating Independence Day. I would like to celebrate it in the weekend, and they said no, ABR, the Orthodox can, according to the Halacha, can celebrate only on ABR. I said, well, when I have my daughter has a birthday, we're doing the celebration on the weekend because we want that everybody will come to that. And this is a very big issue because you have one budget to do a big, huge party for everybody to celebrate. And I got all kinds of answers like, you will lose the moment, or so Israel, you will not lose the moment. when they celebrate Independence Day, and I understand in Israel it's Yom Shabbaton, everybody in holiday, so if it's Tuesday or Thursday, everybody celebrates, it's easy. But here, especially in Texas, when it's far away and driving a long time, it's we want to celebrate in the weekend. So this is like
Weekend, you mean Saturday?
Yeah, or Sunday.
And what?
To celebrate it in the time that teenagers that not they are in final exam, they cannot come on Tuesday afternoon to celebrate Independence Day, but they can come on Sunday. So this is a big issue when you have one budget, and how do you deal and respect all the community and not hurt the Orthodox feeling or so.
That's a great question. I want to start with that one.
I'll answer that question first, because we do
You
both.
bet.
We do both, right? So here in Washington, the embassy, we'll celebrate Independence Day on Independence Day. At the JCC, we have an Israel festival that's on the weekend, and it's around Independence Day, and it's on Sundays, and everybody comes.
Yep.
And you do as much both as you can do.
I'm in the committee of the celebration in the JCC, and I understand the answer that we want to include everybody, and I feel from year to year less people coming to celebrate it. And it hurts me because I want that it will be you celebrate it.
And my answer would be not a content answer, but a process answer, which is in your community, the answer to the question is have a conversation, right? The conversation itself about whether or not to do that and engaging people in that conversation is more important and more valuable than whatever the answer is. Because if you can engage the constituents in your community around that conversation, that idea, no matter what you decide, you will have enriched your community forever. So I would really encourage you to struggle with the question.
If each of you can answer, maybe one of you, about the influencers and about the mothers and how do we make them connect?
Yeah, in terms of the influencers, Robin, the idea of a force multiplier, I think in many ways they self-identify, right? These are the people who have enough of the passion that they're going to come and say, "Nu, I want to do something. What can you do?" I think that, when all of us are looking for our leadership, there's the old-fashioned 3 W's that we talk about, work, wealth, wisdom. But I think that, you have to have developed this over time, which is an eye for picking out leadership, and you have people in the community who have done this for a while and get it, but nothing will replace those individuals who can pull others with them. And I think Michael said it best when he said, the Israelis have been the best at the word-of-mouth marketing, this idea of viral marketing. And so I want to go back to the question you asked before about whether we should program for adults or kids. You should program for what the community wants. We've for too long been doing top-down programming. We come up with an idea that we think is great, and then we put out great marketing, and then we go and say, go recruit people to come. But if we do it from the bottom up, say, what does our community want? And then provide that, then the force multipliers are going to emerge naturally from that, and boom, the next thing you know, they're the ones who are coming together to plan these projects.
And one word about influences also, which is our organizations have always been really good at saying, this is now a top priority. We have to go do it. So to me, it's, we had decided that it was imperative, we have to have Israelis on the board. So I was standing in the men's health center at the JCC. My locker is next to Avi Almazlino's locker. Avi Almazlino, that's an interesting name. I'll show up when he shows up one day, and there we are working out. And he was a real chayal. He was in the Golani in the Israeli army. Now he's a neurologist living for 25 years in Newton. And we became friends, and he's now on the board. But only because we had decided that this was absolutely something we had to do. So I think that's where it starts. It's like the JCC has to say, we have to have X on. Well, look, we did it with money, right? We have to have wealthy people on the board. We went out and found them.
Yeah, that's the next. Okay, so
It starts in the locker room, basically.
It starts in the locker room.
The next group is waiting. I promise you we'll find someone to answer your question privately. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for